Okay, this is the part where Brad and I usually do some like dumb chat, and that's how we start the show. Because then we talk a little bit, and then we go, "Okay, start the show." So
Start the show.
start the show. We got an extra special show tonight, so everybody, hang on. Here we go. Wait, I gotta get it. I'm a little discombobulated as usual. Here we go. Here's actually the start of the show. All right, hopefully that worked. We'll see, because I'm running on a shoestring operation here tonight. But welcome everybody to the Annoying Peasant Radio Show. I got again a kind of a different setup, so hopefully the audio is coming through okay. I'll get in the chat here in a second so I can see if anybody's in there. But on this edition, we have my brother Marty with us. Say hello, Marty. This is a little awkward.
Hi, Tom.
Yeah.
Hi, Annoying Peasant listeners.
Yeah. Maybe it's not plural. It could be just listener. You never know. And Holly, my niece, is sitting here. You can say hello, Holly. Cool. So anyway, we got a number of things on tap to chat about tonight. But first of all, again, I want to welcome everybody and thanks for joining us. It's marvelous that you're here. I think I had a couple conversations this last week, so it's quite possible that we have a few new people on the show. Oh yeah, we got people. I'm opening the chat. So, and look at that. Tanya says, hello, Holly. Thanks, Tanya.
Hi, Tom and Marty.
Yeah. Great that you joined us tonight. And hey, Tanya, Tim may join us and a few others. So hopefully you won't be all alone in there tonight. I apologize. I know last time you were, and you had a whole bunch of great comments, and I wasn't good at keeping track of all of them. So anyway, let me get on with the show. We'll actually get things really going here. I got to always get in the right spot, and I'm never there. I've been starting with this kind of a big spiel on the introduction to the show, and then I really trimmed it back last week. And this week, I guess I've expanded it a little bit, and in anticipation that we may have a few new people listening. So here we go. You know, like I always say, this show is an education in the political philosophy of freedom, the correct answer to the problem of social order. It aims to define freedom from its foundations and develop its outcomes through current events and situations brought about by the current system. Another way of putting it is this show is simply about justice, the foundation of which is property rights rooted in self-ownership and the non-aggression principle. I attempt to apply these principles to all facets of social life, and at times will challenge your thinking in doing so. And I really understand that people's thinking will be challenged. It's different. I well understand that the notion of a stateless society presents a challenge to the vast majority. It seems unfathomable to most. It is the only solution to the problem of social order, however. I hope that our understanding of the nature of man grows as our discussion continues. You must endeavor to overcome your indoctrination and prepare to apply the foundations of justice consistently, and I will attempt to shed light on the fallacy, injustice, and unsustainability of the state. That is what I attempt to do on every episode of this show. I well understand the notion of a free society and its ramifications, and that they seem implausible at first. However, they will become inevitable once I properly define and defend them. My aim is to create the proper context, and your responsibility is to think about it. So that's maybe, first time I read I think Brad goes, wow, that's more than a mouthful, and it is. There's just a lot to say, and I think it's partly because the show can be about so many different topics, and for me, that's what keeps it interesting. So again, I'm lucky to have my brother and my niece with me tonight, so I wanted to start kind of with a quote. Actually, I did a little while back from Bastiat, and I just think it's a really interesting quote. So this is from Bastiat. He says, "The law has placed the collective force at the disposal of the unscrupulous who wish, without risk, to exploit the person, liberty, and property of others. It has converted plunder into a right in order to protect plunder. It has converted lawful defense into a crime in order to punish lawful defense." And again, that's a relatively short quote from Bastiat, but I think there's a lot in there. And again, this Bastiat wrote if I remember right, like 1600s. So this stuff is not new. It's just been, I think, at least for me, resurfacing, I guess. And I think there is a bit of an upswell in the change of the political discourse to some degree. Not enough, but I think it's coming. So with that, I'll just leave that at that. And then announcements. I usually do a few announcements just to keep things a little bit current and let people know what's going on. Not to say that this is the all-encompassing announcements, but hey, do you realize it's Fat Tuesday?
Yes, I do. I do know that.
You saw
I
that
saw
on
it
the
on the news. Yes, and I pointed it out to
I don't know
you.
what Fat Tuesday is.
Oh, see, we could educate you. New Orleans, and I'm only going to be there 2 days late. Fat Tuesday is a big party before. Thank you. What's the Ninja Sun or what is it?
Yes.
Anyway, thank you, Tina. So anyway, Fat Tuesday is the big festival before Lent. The season of Lent starts. Is it only for the Catholics? I can't even recall. I know it's the Catholics. It is only the
It
Catholics.
seems weird like heck to me. Party like mad just before you go into Lent.
Well, that's
and say what you're not going to do.
By the way, you do know one of the reasons that Catholicism has been so widely accepted is because that is one of the religions that allowed people to drink. The number of religions that did not allow it, they didn't gain such popularity. So there was a marketing plan in place. Anyway, so just so everybody knows, we're well aware it's Fat Tuesday. And again, something I've been announcing since fall, Agorafest 2015 at the Villa Maria Conference Center and Retreat. That's September 24th to 27th, and I've been saying this for weeks that we're going to get Nick on to explain because I know a number of things have been coming into place, and Nick's going to explain those to us, and we will have him on here very shortly. It's just a scheduling thing when he's going to be available and when we're available. The other thing that's kind of cool, and if you have a chance, I don't know if, I assume the Liberty Forum will have a bunch of YouTubes after the forum, but that's March 5th through 8th if you are interested in checking it out live. It is, however, in Manchester, New Hampshire. So if you're in the Manchester area, that's the place to be. There's going to be at least 23 speakers, including Jeffrey Tucker, Walter Block, David Boaz, and a whole bunch of others. And for me, Walter Block is kind of on the top of the list. He's very interesting, great speaker, smart guy. So I would encourage that. And by the way, since I'm going to be in New Orleans, I actually am going to check because he teaches at Loyola University in New Orleans. So I might be able to check him out, meet up with him there, possibly. And then the other thing I always try to encourage people to do, I've been posting on the Facebook page a series from Harvard Law School. It's very interesting. It's Justice, the series entitled Justice, What's the Right Thing to Do? It's by Michael Sandel, obviously lecturer there at Harvard. He's a very interesting guy. Again, when I make these posts on Facebook, I'm not saying the guy's making the strongest case for libertarianism or freedom, but he does raise the right questions.
He was the guy with the trolley going down.
Yes.
To save 5 people, should you push someone in front?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he.
By the way, I always thought the conclusion with that is you should choose to throw yourself in front of the trolley and stop it, right? That's really the moral thing to do, isn't it?
It would
Wouldn't be that the total libertarian thing to do? Yep, we need to stop this trolley, save the other 5 people. I'm jumping in front instead of pushing someone else in front.
Exactly. He never used that as one of the instances there, but yes, you're absolutely correct.
I gotta say, I was a little gun shy though to jump in front.
I think people tend to be
Pushing Tina in.
No, but and the foundation for that is, of course, because of private property rooted in self-ownership. Since you're a self-owner, you could decide to jump in front, but you are obviously not an owner of the next individual, so therefore it would be a violation of his property right to push him.
I'd be so worried about my family starving to death that I couldn't do it.
Okay. Well, everybody has responsibilities in this world. Anyway.
Coward.
So I think I posted the 5th episode, which is, if I remember right, the 9th and the 10th lecture in the series. And I believe there's like 24 lectures. Basically, you get to go to Harvard lecture for free. It's on YouTube. I strongly encourage anyone to watch those. Again, they raise great questions. Some of the responses, I had to laugh that these Harvard students would say some of these things. On the other hand, they're young people, and that's part of even old people make a lot of mistakes, which is really kind of depressing. It's better to make them when you're young, not when you're old. But anyway, I encourage you to check that out. It's very interesting. And just for a second, I'm going to switch back to the chat room. And Tanya just posted our Bastiat quote. So yes, you are up to the minute, Tanya. And I always thank you for everything you do for us. It's fantastic. I'm sorry that you're alone there for a moment, but being male, I can't do two things at once. I can't actually do the show and chat simultaneously. Sorry. I know you're well aware of that. So I have to talk to you, I guess, is the way. But Lisa may be in there shortly. She said she would be. Anyway, so watch that series on justice. Again, I just put them on the Facebook page. I try to get them there every week, but I think I'm a week behind now. I missed 1 week. But anyway, and then the last announcement I had for the evening is that, in fact, the chat room is open, and Tanya's getting lonely in there. So if anybody has the time or the inclination, go in there and you can chat with Tanya. She has, of course, a lot of great thoughts. So then we do a little news section, and I do a follow-up, and then we do the feature story. So I'll try to run through this and make this a little quick tonight. The news is, this is my question to my brother. If you heard this, the rumor mill, Apple to buy Tesla within the next 18 months.
Yeah, interesting. I thought I read something about that actually they're thinking that Apple might be doing something with the communication in cars, not actually being involved in the car. So there's a little back and forth.
Yeah, and this was seen as the way of them kind of taking control of the car, but not having to do it because it's already done in a way.
You saw the 60 Minutes guy who can hack into your car, right?
I don't think I saw that one.
Oh, yeah. So this guy is showing how he's some really smart hacker guy. And, with all the computers taking control and self-driving cars, he was showing how he could hack into a self-driving car.
Yeah.
Boy, think about the liability there.
Issues. Yes. And that's something we're going to talk about here. Just a second, liability, and it's very important. Liability and recourse matters a lot. The other thing, the next one was kind of a news item that I don't want to spend a whole ton of time about. It very interesting. Uber was a little bit in the news, and I think a lot of people don't know Uber too well. I obviously don't know it that well, but I have taken a couple rides in Uber. It's actually a really cool concept. Just for people who aren't in the know, it's an app for your smartphone, and you can essentially prearrange or on call, essentially, arrange a taxi ride. But when I say arrange a taxi ride, there are no Uber cars in a sense. Apparently and this part I'm not positive, I believe they're all like subcontractors. They have their own car. They got to go through
a little Uber certification.
Background blessing by Uber, right? To what extent, I can't tell you. You might be uncomfortable with it. The next guy's comfortable with it. Obviously, you don't buy the service if you're not comfortable with it. But it is kind of cool that what they do. We did a story a while back on surge pricing. A lot of people don't know what surge pricing is, and it's actually very interesting. It's actually what happens like in a hurricane and these things, but I'm not going to go all the way that far, but it's interesting. Anyway, what happens is, since this runs through software, they're acutely aware, or the software is acutely aware of, all of a sudden there's a huge spike in demand in one location that people want rides from originating from a certain location. When you make the arrangement on your smartphone, I assume you can do it from a computer too, but typically people do it from their smartphone, the price is there. The price is arranged for that ride. And you, of course, either accept or deny. And if the price is right, you accept. If the price is wrong, you deny, right? It's a question of alternative. You go, well, I'll walk in the rain for 2 blocks for that amount of money, or no, this is cheap, I'll ride the thing. So it's all on you. But what they do employ is surge pricing. So when they get a whole bunch of demand, the price goes up. So just because you've taken the exact same route, 10 times previously, you tend to just kind of do it automatically yourself and say, well, I know what the charge is going to be, so you don't really pay attention. But you could actually be at, high travel time or high demand time, even possibly unbeknownst to you. So there have been instances when the price was actually 4 times the regular rate. And of course, people accepted the rate. And then when they saw the charge, by the way, it goes automatically to your credit card. You put that information in. So you're, at the time of delivery of service, if you don't look what they're going to charge you, you can be surprised afterwards, right? When your credit card bill is that charge is 4 times what you thought it was going to be. So again, I encourage everybody to look. Well, as a result, here's what happened. Here's one situation that happened to Uber. In Sydney, Australia, to be honest, I don't know exactly when this happened. I don't think it was that long ago. There was some kind of hostage crisis or some situation, and all of a sudden a bunch of people started requesting Uber to come pick them up, right? Well, Uber software detected a surge in the demand, so the price went up. So now
Because they want more drivers to come into the area.
that's exactly what happens. If you have an understanding of economics, you know what's actually happening. And again, most of the comments on this story was, it's despicable. I would never take Uber. It's a dangerous situation. They should just come and pick up the people and help people out, right? Well, I got a feeling, when most people, when I'm in my work environment and I'm negotiating for a higher salary, I don't go, you know what? I know you pay a guy at my level $10 an hour, but I'll just take 5 because I don't want, to push you to the limit. Well, when Uber does this, when they can get $10 instead of 5, now people accuse them of being greedy. And I don't know any of these fellows. They may, in fact, all be greedy. They may, in fact, none of them be greedy. I don't know them. But I'm saying this is in their... Anyway, the bottom line...
Hey, if I'm scared for my life, I want to get out of there at any price,
Yeah.
right? So, and I want drivers to come in. So what does it take to get a guy to say, hey, I'd rather be sitting in my hot tub right now. Wait a minute, I'm getting in the Uber car. I'm running over there.
That's the point. Would you like no cars to come at a low price or a lot of cars to come? Because that's your choice.
Yes.
That is the economic reality. If those drivers are not drawn to that location by a higher price, they're not coming.
Isn't this the same complaint about gas and water at Katrina?
Exactly.
When the whole Katrina thing happened, right? People were mad. Well, you're taking advantage of. Well, do you want water? If you're really thirsty and you need water, in a way, you start to not care about the price. And
Walter Williams wrote about the hotel rooms as people were evacuating to the north out of New Orleans, and the hotel prices, that were, I don't know. Normally, I'm making up numbers, $70, $80 were now $150, $200. And again, it was Walter. I stole this from Walter Williams. He says, what would you prefer? Well, what it does is when the price is high, it tells people either A, seek alternatives, or B, conserve. In other words, a somewhat larger family might normally take 2 rooms. Instead, they go, geez, at that rate, we're all going to squeeze into 1 room. So
now there's another room available.
Exactly. So the question is like the same. Do you want a hotel room available at a high price, or would you prefer to have no rooms available at a low price?
I want the government to form a department to manage these kinds of catastrophes and make a real mess of it. And I could pay them millions of dollars for years when they once in a while would get used.
Yes, we all know that bureaucracy makes this up cheaper.
Yes.
Because those people all work for free. Actually, I think they pitch in to work there. Anyway, it's just so interesting what happened there. I posted that story on the Facebook page. And again, I would encourage you to read that and you'll get the proper context of the whole story. I cannot recreate that right here at now. But, Uber made a statement. Okay, so there was this huge backlash that they were gouging people, which is what happens in every situation, right? And they said, hey, this runs on software. We saw what happened. And as a result, the people who paid the higher fare, they actually refunded them. The people who were yet to come, they charged them the non-surge rate. Okay. Then the discussion on the comments was, well, they only did that because of the bad PR. And here's the deal. First of all, can't you recognize that they're actually going against economic reality? And why? Well, because of public outcry, basically. Now, I would argue the outcry is a result of a lack of knowledge of basic economics. Yet those people are still potentially Uber's customer, and they tried to react to those customers and as best they could, give them what they want. And in this case, I don't know what else they could have really done, right? It was a software thing that changes the price. They saw that or they heard complaints. I don't know how they actually heard of it initially, but they made a change. And I think what they did is very over the top kind. They don't need to do that. And in response to that, I just wanted to read what one of the commenters said. But go ahead.
Well, I wonder who took the hit on that, on the refund on the money. Was the drivers?
No. According to Uber paid the drivers the surge pricing, and they took the hit.
I think Uber, as for their marketing or whatever, if they want to do that kind of thing, they can. But
Right, it's up to
hey,
them.
I tell you what, if I'm there in that catastrophe, and now that let's say they were taking money back from the drivers or something, they can't get enough drivers in there where I want to get out of there. I'm kind of mad about that.
Yeah, that's a catastrophe.
That's a catastrophe.
But I think one commenter basically addressed that, and he did a really good job. He said, this was again after much criticism on the surge pricing during the hostage crisis in Sydney. He said, this is his quote, "Uber does not have a responsibility to provide evacuation for public safety. They are there to provide a ride. If that ride is for you to get somewhere that you feel is safer, so be it. If there's a lot of demand and they want to charge more for the ride, then what is the problem with that?" Right? If you think about it, it's economic reality in play. If you deny economic reality, just as you said many times, though the capacity to move people away may not come, right? They don't have the incentive to relocate to there because there's no higher price. They might as well just keep carting people around, on the outskirts of Sydney or wherever they are.
In fact, just like you were saying about the hotel room, as the price goes higher, maybe it's 4 people getting in that car.
Right.
And
yeah,
I'll go where he's going.
Yeah.
It's out of here.
Exactly. I don't care what the final destination as long as it's not here.
Yeah.
So anyway, enough of Uber. Again, I encourage you to check out that story. Interesting. And of course, a lot of times I get a chuckle or get more entertainment out of the comments than anything. Some people, I think, are just void of knowledge on economics, and others are very good at succinctly making their point. So it's kind of fun to see them. So anyway, whatever floats your boat there, go ahead. From there, I just want to move on because I'd like to keep the show moving tonight. I've always been trying to concentrate on making the show shorter, and I'm never successful at it. But just so you know, my heart is there. My execution stinks. Last week, we talked kind of at great length about the measles outbreak, and the vaccination thing is what came to a head. And there was a lot of aspects to that story. Actually, and that's one of the reasons I covered it, was so interesting because there's so many different aspects to the story. And I know Tanya has commented, and I'm not going to say it right, Tanya. Many times you said, does anybody think that it's kind of weird that forced injections, nobody thinks that's, over the top? I forced to put this stuff in your body. and the way she puts it, of course, gets the point across. Very interesting. Anyway, by the way, I see Tim's in the chat room, and thanks for joining us, Tim. Sorry again, I can't do 2 things at once. I happen to be male, and that's my handicap there. But at least Tanya's not alone. So anyway, thanks for joining us. And I look forward, by the way, to seeing you tomorrow, Tim. That'll be fantastic.
Texas 7.
Texas father of 7.
Texas 7.
That's one busy man.
Yep.
So anyway, back to the vaccination thing. One of the issues that we raised is, how does this work when there's mandatory vaccinations? What happens to your recourse if you have a complication in some circumstances, supposedly, I don't have personal experience with this, serious complications. Some may actually not be serious. But what's the liability of the manufacturer, the provider of the actual injection, all that along, if it's mandatory? So we kind of raised that question and said, hey, I basically just said last week, you don't have recourse. Well, I come to learn a little something. I know a few of you people listening might have just fallen off your chair when I said I actually learned something. But I gotta find this article here. Very interesting. This was from the Wall Street Journal, and it was from February 23rd, 2009. So this is not new information. Again, I can't vouch for the accuracy of this. I didn't write the article. I didn't do the research. I'm just reading you the article. But it's entitled, "Vaccine Makers Enjoy Immunity." Get the word immunity. I thought that was a really good one. Anyway, I just wanted to read a little bit because this is interesting. One of the little, I'm reading from the article. By the way, the author is Avery Johnson. And it's one of the little noticed reasons that Wyeth was attractive enough to command a $68 billion price for rival Pfizer Inc.'s planned takeover sits in a building catty-corner from the White House across Pennsylvania Avenue. That is where a special vaccines court hears cases brought by parents who claim their children have been harmed by routine vaccinations. The court, and the law that established it more than 2 decades decades ago, buffers Wyeth and other makers of childhood disease vaccines from much of the litigation risk that dogs traditional pill manufacturers, and is an important reason why the vaccine business has been transformed from a risky, low-profit venture in the 70s to one of the pharmaceutical industry's most attractive product lines today. And imagine on the producer side, wait, you're telling me that I can create this vaccine and you're going to shield me in very large part, at least, if not perfectly, at least you could argue imperfectly, you're going to shield me from liability of any problems associated with it? I got a feeling there's a lot of boardrooms that we're in. That sounds like a good deal, right? With all the lawsuits they face and all the other aspects of the business. But let me go a little further. The legal shield known as the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, sounds a bit like a government program already, right? Was put into place in 1986 to encourage the development of vaccines, a mainstay of the nation's public health policy. A spate of lawsuits against vaccine makers in the 70s and 80s had caused dozens of companies to get out of the low-profit business, creating a public health scare. Now, I happen to have been alive back in that ancient history in the 70s and 80s. Okay, I'm not saying I was the most aware kid in the world, but I don't remember any scare. I don't think I might have been scared of the bully down the block or falling off my bike or something, but I don't know if I was scared of that. But anyway, the strategy worked, and the public health implications have been sizable. Vaccines have driven huge reductions, and in the case of smallpox, for instance, complete eradications of major childhood diseases. I don't know if that statement is actually true, but this is interesting. Paul Offit, Chief of Infectious Disease at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. By the way, he was one of the guys that we talked about last week on one of the NPR shows. I can't remember if he was on the On Point show or the Kathleen Dunn show, who developed a vaccine for rotavirus with Merck and Company, says, if that act didn't happen, I think American children would have been at risk. And again, if you do have an effective vaccine, of course, the whole idea is you reduce the risk. I get that. But this is interesting. This Dr. Offit was he was completely for mandatory vaccinations. And I'm not saying this proves anything. I'm just saying it's interesting that he actually profited from making this all happen, right? He was working for Merck, who had in bed with the state to make this. So wouldn't he have the incentive to say, wait a minute, if we make this mandatory for everyone, now we have tremendous demand, and if there is an error in our process or in the product that we deliver, we're shielded. And again, I'm not saying that's why they did it. I'm saying, wouldn't that be at least part of the calculus? And that's what I find interesting.
And if you're shielded, where's the motivation to make it safer? Maybe
exactly. You are the incentive is to increase the risk in that supply of your product because you're shielded. Why would you reduce risk beyond your shield level? Right? We don't even have exposure there. But vaccines have also become a big business. So this is maybe some would say coincidental, some would say cause and effect. Vaccines have also become big business. They are poised to generate, let me get this number right, $21.5 billion in annual sales from their makers by 2012. Again, this article is from 2009. According to France's leading producer of inoculations. At a time when pharmaceutical companies are being battered by generic competition to their best-selling drugs, vaccines offer an appealing alternative because they are biologic products that can't be copied. Another big draw is the partial protection from the liability risk offered by the Vaccines Court, officially known as the Office of Special Masters at the U.S. Court of Federal Claims. My point here being is now that these companies are shielded, guess who's taken on the liability for these items? All the people sitting in this room and more. It's the federal government is behind this, and where do they get their resources?
From the taxpayer.
From the taxpayer. So you've taken on the risk that Merck, in this case, in this specific example, doesn't have to take on, but should rightly take on, right? Well, what company doesn't enter into some market that someone else is going to take care of the downside and I get to get the upside? I think that's a good deal. And the article goes on. Very good article. Interesting. Again, I'm not saying I agree or everything here is a defense of freedom, but I'm saying it does raise some very interesting points. And I think what you can glean out of this is definitely worth it. So that was just kind of our follow-up from last week. I got to see here. I took notes. See if there's. Yeah. The other thing is this also helps to create. In most people's view, or a lot of people's view, the monster of big pharma. So a lot of the people who are for the mandate for mandatory vaccinations, that helps create these companies to become even larger. And then in their next breath, they say, I hate big pharma. I'm like, well, you're helping create big pharma. And now you're saying you hate big pharma. Again, I think most people don't understand what their actions are, the ramifications of their actions. And that's why I'm here. I'm here to point this stuff out so people become aware. So anyway, we got to move on. I don't even know how long we've been on the air. Probably half hour. We're already getting long in the tooth. But now we're going to get to the main topic that I wanted to get to tonight. And this is what happens on every episode, by the way. I get so enamored with some of these news stories. I think they're so interesting and they're, for most part, timely. So I think people have interest in them. But I think they depict things that are very important. But anyway, this feature segment that I wanted to go to now is entitled, basically we're talking about competing with the government or the state in the marketplace. And I know people say, well, that doesn't happen. You don't know what you're talking about. And of course I don't know what I'm talking about. That's why I'm on the radio. But nonetheless, this story, I posted this one on the Facebook page. And I would encourage everyone to read that whole story so you gain the context from the author. And the author in this case is a guy who had essentially an organic certified farm, Northern California, 40 miles east of Sacramento. And he just had 10 acres. If I recollect the story properly, he just leased the 10 acres. He made all kinds of improvements to the land, etc. He writes much more eloquently than I could ever write. And I just want to read you some from the story so you gain a little bit of the context. He says, in the heat of summer, the fields cover the bronze landscape like a green quilt spread over sand. 10 acres of certified organic vegetables trace the contours of the small valley floor. Tomatoes glow crimson. Flowers bloom, zinnias, lavender, daisies. Watermelons grow fat, littering the ground like beach balls. It is how a sustainable farm, and that's in quotes, is unsustainable, competing with the competitors in the same market and the state. That's fine. And I'm saying, read the story. But this guy, later in the story, is brought to his attention. He was requested to make a presentation in front of high school students. And prior to this, in the article, he's talking about how people come to his farm. They say, wow, this is a beautiful place. You must have a great life here. I'd love to do this someday. Many people would say this to him.
Seems kind of romantic.
That's the word. See, that's why you're here. You got the word. That's the word I was looking for. But, and what part of this article was about was first to set the stage, but really to then explain the realities of the situation and more the economic realities. So he gives this presentation at a local high school, and I just want to read this paragraph to you. He says, when a student asked if my farm was sustainable, I told her that it was certified organic. I managed my soil fertility through crop rotations and compost applications. I didn't use synthetic pesticides. I conserved water. But no, I'd said, I didn't think my farm was sustainable. Like all the other farms I knew, my farm relied on uncompensated labor and self-exploitation. My farm was not sustainable because I knew the years my partner and I could continue to work without a viable income were numbered. Okay, so he's saying financially it's unsustainable. So you go, that's kind of interesting. I mean, maybe for me, maybe I ought to run the place a little better, and then it would be financially, right?
Well, I was kind of thinking when I was reading it, a 10-acre farm is not a big idea. How do we get somewhere in life? When we're making cars, whatever, it's mechanization. Chinese farmers doing 1-acre rice paddies is just not making it. I mean, you gotta have some scale. You gotta be able to bring a big combine in there.
Right. So, right. That's what I think a lot of people think that too. I think that's valuable. So he says, I'll read one more paragraph. It says, my farm's become a billboard. And like all billboards, this one is deceptive. It depicts abundance and prosperity. 2 young smiling farmers working among neat rows of greens under a crisp morning sun. Heaping bins of produce, all of it picked fresh and free of synthetic chemicals. Despite all the talk of small farms disappearing, despite concerns of big ag controlling our food, GMOing everything, and dousing it all in Roundup, driving past my farm might feel a flutter of relief. Think there's a small farm right there where I can go and pick up a bag of organic baby kale. Spot a bluebird resting on a fig branch. Notice a patch of weeds growing among the lettuce. Again, the romantic part of it. Like, wow, that's great. And obviously it works because he's there. Is what I think, again, what most people think. But now we're getting to the meat of what I wanted to talk about this article. This paragraph, this is from the author. This is not my words. He says, meanwhile, millions of dollars in federal subsidies are doled out to monocrop farms growing high-input GMO corn and soybeans. Meanwhile, the EPA continues to approve the use of pesticides such as atrazine, which have been linked to birth defects, infertility, and cancer. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court rules in favor of Monsanto, allowing the corporation to sue farmers whose fields are inadvertently contaminated with GMO seeds. And I skip a couple lines in here. He says, because the truth is, no matter how many young people choose to farm, no matter how many bunches of kale are made into smoothies, or canvas shopping bags are packed full of colorful carrots and lacy heads of lettuce, no matter how many hip new restaurants declare themselves farm to fork, none of these things address the policies that dictate how our country's food system works. Policies that have created a society in which the small farmer can't even earn a living. And I think I was with you on the scale thing, and maybe the scale still has something to do with it. I'm not saying there's no element to scale. But I think this is the thing, at least, I'm not saying it's the bigger thing. This thing is fixable, right? With the power of the pen, you could eliminate the subsidies. And
shouldn't be subsidies to the farm, shouldn't be subsidies to the oil industry, shouldn't be subsidies. It's distorting the marketplace.
It's exactly what it's doing. And in this case, it's distorting the marketplace to what many people complain about. Well, there's all kinds of crap in the food today. We got to find a better food supply. But your tax dollars, as you say that, you are subsidizing those guys to grow that food that you claim you don't like. Right?
The one thing I didn't get there, I mean, aren't there any subsidies to the small farmer? I'm guessing that if he grows corn, he does get some subsidy. Now, it may be too hard for him for 10 acres, to deal with the paperwork and all that. I'm guessing.
Yeah. And that is, again, one of the elements to regulation that favors and promotes bigger companies is they can handle the overhead where the little guy, and that's part of, I believe, is part of the purpose of it. I want to limit my competition because I want to heap overhead on them so they cannot compete with me, right? It definitely reduces the incentive to enter into the marketplace. And anything that reduces incentives for competition, I argue, ultimately is bad for the consumer. And call me crazy, but I like stuff of higher quality, cheaper. I prefer those over low quality and more expensive. So anyway, related to this, so I thought that was interesting, what these guys had gone through and they recognized policies by the state that they were competing with. And it's very difficult to compete with millions of taxpayers' funds, and here you are pulling weeds by hand, right? And I would argue that's the definition of an unfair playing field. Okay, so related to that, I found this other story here in the last couple days, and the reason I mentioned the Apple thing about Tesla, because now we're going to shift gears and talk a little bit about Tesla. Now, this story that I read, I think I could look here a second. I think I posted this on the Facebook page. If I hadn't, I'll put it up there. But this is an interesting angle. This is from, this story was written from the angle of basically, should I invest or do I recommend counsel someone to invest in Tesla or not, right? What are the good things that are coming up as an investor in Tesla? What are the pros and the cons, right? And I think that was very interesting in how this was supported. He said, so again, these are words from the author of the article, and here, it'll take me a second here, but I will find the article so you can get the title, and if I don't have it on the Facebook page, take here 1 second to scroll up. Hang on 1 second. It's entitled The Case Against Tesla and Why Success May Be Harder Than Ever. It was written by Stephen Lang, and again, this is February 12th, so just a few days ago, 2015, of course. So let me get back to my show notes here so I can get going with that. So if I don't have it on the Facebook, oh, I got the wrong thing open. If I don't have it on the Facebook page, I'll put it there again. But again, to gain the full context, but we'll go over maybe the crux of it here. He says, so this is from the author. He says, about a month ago, I decided there was a similar opportunity to short shares of Tesla Motors. I've supported some of their more virtuous pursuits, and the Tesla Model S is a superb product. But I think Tesla will be unprofitable for years to come and has morphed into a glamour firm, one where people gleefully invest in the promise of a company's mission and personality of its CEO rather than its actual financial performance. So here's why I bet against Tesla. An investment I sold, he says, and I assume this is for full disclosure on his part, for a profit, again, after its quarterly losses were announced Wednesday and before this article was published. He goes on to say, Tesla is investing in low-margin business. Forget about pie-in-the-sky returns if you want to invest in Tesla or any automaker. Car companies typically make only 3 or 4% return when the economy is healthy. When the economy is in recession, they collectively lose billions due to fixed costs that are mostly unavoidable. Let me just inject a little thing right there. But if you're a big enough car company and you lose enough, the taxpayer again rushes in to bail you out. That I think he should have mentioned, but he didn't. But I'm not the author. He goes on to say battery companies also operate in a low margin business, making Tesla's huge investment in the Gigafactory, I think it's in like Reno, near Reno, Nevada, seem even more risky. And again, the risky statement, I'm not too sure about, because if you go under, do they subsidize you back out? And again, that's something that would have to get sorted out. So that's one. Anyway, he says Tesla has more than electric cars to compete against. And I'm getting to the thing of you have alternatives, which again is an economic issue. One of the reasons why Tesla has done poorly in Europe and China is because both markets are loaded with millions of diesel vehicles that can provide outstanding performance and fuel economy without a stiff price premium. In China, the largest automotive market in the world, Tesla has stumbled with only 120 vehicles sold last month. Tesla's business model depends on subsidies. This is again according to the author. These are not my words. Tesla has received nearly $130 million in carbon tax credits just from the state of California alone. The federal government has provided $7,500 per vehicle subsidy for several years now, while 23 states provide additional subsidies between $1,000 and $5,000. The current level of subsidies for a Tesla equate to roughly 20% of the selling price of a Tesla Model S. So, of course, what I'm pointing out here, whatever you pay, you're paying 20% less. But wait, you're not paying a full 20% less because some of your tax money went into that subsidy. So 19%, or it's probably closer to 19.9999%. But right, you get the point. Some of your money is gone in there to help reduce the price of the car. And then the real loser in that is the guy who never buys the Tesla because he subsidized the Tesla and he didn't get to drive it. And after all of this, by the way, Tesla still lost over $100 million last quarter and delivered fewer than 10,000 vehicles. So how's that subsidy thing working for him, right? And the biggest risk there is the stroke of the pen changes everything, and what's marginally economic or financially viable is now no longer financially viable to a huge segment of the marketplace, and their volume theoretically goes way down if that happens.
Well, so far the people buying these cars, it's not a marginal thing for them. They buy them because they want to say they're doing something good.
Yes.
I see license plates running around here, green car or, I forget. There's a few of them that are witty, but they're kind of bragging about what they're doing.
Oh, yeah, and I've seen a couple up in the Midwest saying something like, how do you like the price of gas now? Which that bumper sticker kind of flipped on them when the price...
The price of gas went down.
Yeah, went down tremendously. So now they're driving around with the bumper sticker saying, like, how do you like the price of gas? And, people, Not so bad, actually. So anyway, again, typically, and I'm not here to tell you that the petrol world is a free market, because it's certainly not. But those swings typically wouldn't happen so drastically in a true free market, because demand doesn't spike all of a sudden typically. Now, it can seasonally and other things for certain reasons. But, in the northern Midwest, we experienced roughly half the price. I mean, it actually went sub $2 for the Midwest is a big deal, because we were at the $4 for I don't know how long. So again, this is from the author. Tesla's business model also depends on high gas prices. When gas becomes cheap, consumers traditionally take two steps to the left. Instead of buying a mid-sized car, for example, they opt for crossovers. This is also true within market segments. People who shop for a Tesla also look at less expensive alternatives in the marketplace due to the fact that the cost benefits of owning an electric car go down dramatically when the gas prices drop. The cost benefits go down, but I'm kind of with you. I don't know that that's such a strict comparison by a chunk of those buyers. I assume Tesla has this information at their disposal. They know their customer base, but I think the price is relatively inelastic. That these people have a fair chunk of change. They're going to buy the car, whether it's 10,000 more or 10,000 less. I don't know if it really matters to them. And again, I'm not speaking for Tesla. That's just my gut feel. As a result, a lot of affluent buyers have opted for the Nissan Leaf, which now costs less than $20,000 in certain states, thanks in large part to government subsidies. But again, the point here is that there's a lot of intervention by the state in many different ways. And again, that part to me is very risky, because if somebody else takes office and they have different ideas, legislation, I don't know, what is Obama signing now? Executive orders, right, where he doesn't need to go through Congress. This stuff changes, and all of a sudden on a dime, we made a terrible mistake. We've invested in this, and we should have invested in this because the laws have now just changed. So to me, the marketplace is not nearly as risky as a hampered market, or a free market is not nearly as risky as a hampered market, because in a free market, power of the pen does nothing. I mean, if you don't intervene, you don't intervene. And the marketplace, tastes change in people, to be sure. I don't know what the trend is. I'm just, hamburgers and then chicken and fish become a bigger, eating healthier, I guess. But that happens over some period of time. It's not like a power of the pen. It's like tomorrow, something that was profitable becomes highly unprofitable. There's risk. There's real risk. When things happen gradually, you have the opportunity to change or grow with the marketplace.
I just hate how it just distorts everything.
Yes.
I just hate the distortion. What if they gave a 50% subsidy? Everybody's buying these electric cars. And it's the big thing, and then all of a sudden, like you said, the power of the pen, it goes away, and now all of a sudden we're running in another direction. It needs to be economically viable on its own.
Yeah,
and the other things, gas needs to be economically viable on its own.
Then it's sustainable, right? Talk to the farmer in the previous board, right? It's not sustainable if it's not financially viable. For years, I had friends telling me that you should get a vehicle that burns ethanol, because it's way cheaper. I said, actually, it's way more expensive. I just don't actually pay the full cost of it at the pump. That's why you think it's cheaper. And again, I ask people to think a little one step beyond what you see right at your face. If you can think of that, now you can catch some of this that a lot of people don't catch.
Why make it so dang complicated,
Yeah, and complications cost money, right? It even makes it more expensive to do it that way. But so the author, I'm reading the conclusion from the author. This is not from me. The Tesla S of 2015 can beat a supercar when properly equipped, but the company behind it is unable to make it a profitable one. Unlike last century's best-selling Ford Model T, a car that thrived on simplicity, something you already pointed out, the high costs and business challenges involved for Tesla's products are only the tip of a financial iceberg that requires billions in subsidies and tens of billions of future investments just to stay afloat. This is for a company that currently sells fewer than 35,000 vehicles a year. As much as I love the romance of what Tesla represents, the company's financial weaknesses and competitive threats have only grown stronger, and it will be an unglamorous slog to overcome. And I think even the author recognizes really what the problem is, that this is not a viable, financially a viable model. And the only reason it is semi-viable at the moment is because of subsidization. So my little, a couple points that I wanted to make on this is, I lost it here in just a second. I'll get back to it. Is that economies of scale, and this relates also to the farming thing, are less of an advantage in some markets and even a disadvantage in some cases in a free market. When you grow too large, you can actually lose track of internal costs because you're not paying them directly. Right? The bigger your organization gets, the further away the decision makers get from the customer, right? And these things, I know they're attempting to overcome them. Like you hire a whole bunch of MBAs, some really smart managers, right? That's what you do to make this work. And I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm just saying there are some serious challenges with scale. And some things are just not amenable to scale. Other things are. But most people see scale as a huge advantage, and again, in cases it does, but not always.
Slow to change course.
It's hard to turn an aircraft carrier on a dime, right? And a big advantage of them is the regulatory compliance issue that we talked about. It's much harder to understand the customer, which we said, because the decision makers are further away from the customers. And subsidies, in this case, insulate the farmer from the customer through the message that free market prices convey, right? When they're not getting the price from the consumer, they're also getting income from the state. They don't understand what the customer actually wants. So they may be growing the wrong thing, and that's, who am I to say what the wrong thing is? But something they might otherwise grow something else if they didn't have that subsidy available to them. And I'm not blaming the farmer. I'm not saying the farmer goes, well, wait a minute, you're saying I'm all set up to do this and I can get this much money if I continue, but if I change, I run the risk of not selling my product. I don't have the infrastructure built up to sell this different product, and I lose my subsidy? I ain't doing it. Again, my qualm is with the system, not necessarily with any individual. Of course, I have my trouble with certain individuals too, but the farmer is caught in this as well. That's the point.
Yeah.
So, subsidies encourage current farming practices when a free market would be able to communicate to farmers what products are more highly valued or demanded. In this case, maybe the interpretation is organics versus conventionally farmed products, right? The farmer would get that message much more quickly and strongly if it was a free market. He'd go, I'm growing this GMO modified corn and nobody's buying it. They're all buying it from my neighbor and he's got the organic stuff. Shoot, I'm changing. Well, he's insulated from that, again, is the point. And my big thing on that is, subsidies violate the principle of self-ownership as the state gains its resources to subsidize through taxation. So there's philosophical issues at play. There's issues of the mechanics and the strategy and the tactics at play. These distortions are a problem throughout. It's not that they just affect one part. And a lot of people think, well, these farm subsidies don't, affect me, but they do through your taxation. I don't know if you're in a place that has no farming, you're subsidizing other areas that do have farming. But again, for me, the bigger issue is in principle, it violates the principle of self-ownership or your property rights. But, other people will object and say, farmers simply don't make enough money the way it is. So you have to, if you want them to continue to supply this food, and I use food in quotes because, again, some people argue, well, it's not really food, it's GMO altered stuff instead of real food, right? And that the world desperately needs these things. And if we didn't subsidize farmers, we'd all starve to death. Well, the free market, I think, will not let you ever run out of anything. The price will go high. It will become more scarce. I mean, it could. Shouldn't say will. But then since their margin would be very high in theory, more suppliers would come into the market and say, hey, you're telling me I can make that much money? And all of a sudden things become in better balance. So I think the shortage, now you have another difficulty of changing where we are to a free market system, and there will be some pain if that were ever to happen, if that conversion happened. I'm not denying that. but that's one of the prices you pay for a status system. So they object on the grounds that, farmers have to be subsidized to continue to grow the food. And they also argue, of course, that the ending of the subsidies will hurt the farmers. And no doubt it will, and I don't know how you do that. It's a whole nother topic, how you might transition from a status society to a free society. That's way more than I can handle here in whatever time we're spending to chat here. So I think, I don't know, my question is, I guess my broad things are, maybe many people call the free market as, kind of a survival of the fittest kind of thing. It's just a jungle. I would argue the detractors say that. But that also discounts the uniqueness of the attributes of every human being, right? If it's survival of the fittest, you're saying some people just can't survive. You're saying some people don't have some attributes that are marketable, right? I think everybody does. Now, whether they will bring them to the market, which takes a lot of energy and organization and stuff to do it. But to say that some people can't compete is to say some people are inferior. So I think it kind of flies in the face of saying it's the survival of the fittest. And so what is the free market? And I had this discussion Sunday night with a couple fellows. It's just a summary of voluntary exchanges, right? It's voluntary. We talked about the Uber thing. If you don't like the higher price, don't accept the price and don't take the service. If you think it's still a good value, the only reason you accept the price is because you think you're better off paying that price than not paying that price. And of course, Uber on the other side would rather have your cash than have capacity of a car sitting there or somewhere else if they can gain a premium. So it's just a summary of voluntary exchanges, in which, again, both parties gain. It's not a zero-sum game, as many people like to say. Well, if one side gains, the other side has to lose. That is not the case. And again, we've done shows talking about this in great detail. Beyond that, I would say it's the only moral rationing system, right? If you say voluntary is not the way to make these exchanges, your only alternative to that is to inject the use of aggressive force to coerce someone. Well, to me, that's clearly less moral than a voluntary.
Meaning you have to take the vaccine?
Take the vaccine.
I'm giving you the vaccine.
It's for your own good.
It's for your own good.
Right? And I joke with a lot of people and I say, as soon as you're forced to do something, I'm not saying always, but my ears perk up. This is probably a bad idea. Otherwise, I wouldn't have to be forced to do it. I would do it on my own if it was a good idea. I mean, I tend to think I try to capitalize on good ideas, right? So it's just one thing. And then beyond that, I would argue, and you talked about malinvestment and the distortions that these things cause if you inject force into the system, if you intervene, right? So the last thing I just want to say on that is the free market provides the incentive for the greatest production of wealth, which improves our standard of living. And these are all good things, I think, but everyone has their own position. So I wanted to close tonight, did I miss something there? You had some notes there. Did you get to them?
Am I shy? No, I'm not. I brought everything up. I wanted to bring up.
We got it covered then. Yes. We'll just put this stamp on here.
We have the stamp of approval.
Yeah. Does Holly have a question? Holly doesn't have a question. But you reserve the right to ask one at a later date. Let's do that, okay?
The student from Texas.
The student from Texas.
Has no question.
The star student.
The star from Texas.
Very good. So anyway, I just want to close kind of with a Murray Rothbard quote, because I think people who listen to my show know that he's one of my heroes. And this is just for a little humor. I like a little humor. He says, this was a quote of his that Tanya so graciously posted on her Facebook page, and it always makes me chuckle. He says, who wants good people in government? Good people should be in the private sector, helping us out, helping themselves out in the private sector. We want schmoes in the government. We want people who can't find the doorknob. Why waste productive people as well as looting the taxpayer? And I think I've been told by many people who met Murray personally, said he had a great sense of humor and he was never down, and I can appreciate that about him. And I know my detractors will jump on this and say, well, is that right? but I think it explains a little bit about Dr. Rothbard. Very great show. So in closing, all I want to say is, hey, tell your friends about the show, and say, heck, you can tell your enemies. I don't care. As long as I get more listeners. And most on this episode, again, we hope we provoked you to think a little bit. I'm sure there's things as you listen to the show that there's ideas that we discuss here that seem foreign to you and you can't agree with, and that is completely fine. The angle of the show is not to gain agreement on everything. The angle of the show is to bring up these ideas and get you to think about it. Maybe engage us on the Facebook page. Ask your questions and we'll join in a discussion. Heck, we might even have you on one of the shows. That would be great. So thanks for listening to the show. We greatly appreciate it. And I have to say, since I know that Tanya is in the chat room, Tanya is actually the master of ceremonies next week. She is basically running the show. I'm going along for the ride. I don't even know what the topic is. So this is going to be a whole lot of fun next week. So join us when the Northwoods mom is going to be with us. She's always fun. She always brings a great perspective. And again, Tanya, thanks for everything you do for the show. So with that, I have to leave you. Thanks for listening to the Annoying Peasant Radio Show, and we hope to check you out next week. So join us then. Good night, everybody. Yep. I don't know if it's playing.
It's not.
That's okay. Damn.
Is the volume down?
Something's all right.
The volume is down.
Is it?
Yeah.
Wait.
No.
I'll fix it. No.
Dennis here with episode 29.
No, that's not what we wanted to play.
One thing
I gotta
that
get back to
everyone agrees on is we need
right here. We're gonna fix this.
have a
Good night. Wait.
Without it,
I'm on the chat room here.
unable to
I gotta
pay
get out of the chat room.
security would be
Oops.
vulnerable to predators and never receive any
That was the
justice.
wrong X.
But is that true?
This. Here we
We're all
go.
familiar with those wealthy enough to
Good
live
night,
in
everybody.